And basically, it just gets to be a weird situation, because I know he worked for the FBI, and he worked for other federal agencies. And yet this country has done these horrible things to me and my son, and then they were willing to quit just for him. I mean, obviously he was still working for the country. He was clearly employed with the United States for the United States to quit their state-sponsored torture of me. There's no reason why the United States would quit what they were doing unless it was a favor to him or they thought they were getting something out of it. Because after I wasn't with him, they began torturing me just as badly as before. I mean, not quite as bad as when my son and I left for Canada, what was happening to both me and my son then, but to extreme levels still. And forcing me to be homeless. I mean, without anything. Basically just, in the dirt, pretty much. And that's what this country did. So even if somebody would say, well, he said that he did work for the FBI when he was in Colombia, that doesn't mean that he was working for them in the U.S. Or if somebody said to me, well, he said he had an affair with somebody from the U.S. Department of State, but that doesn't mean he is a U.S. Department of State employee. Okay, the thing is he was connected to the Department of State, he was connected to the FBI, and he was most definitely working for the United States in some capacity, for the United States to quit their state-sponsored torture of me. The United States would not just do that unless it was for a reason for him. And I was also tortured, as I say, one time when I was living with him, I decided to sleep on the couch. But that was a one-time incident. And other than that, I wasn't tortured. Aside from that, I wasn't tortured. So why would the United States do that unless he was their employee? He was their employee, and they wanted him in the country so that he could work for them permanently as a United States citizen. I think it's possible that he not only had his daughter in Colombia, that he had a couple of sons who were maybe being cared for by his brother or whatever, or by a different relative, to make it look like it was their kids. And that could be another reason why he wanted to stay in the U.S. Potentially he has other children in the U.S. And that's why he wanted to have United States citizenship, and why the U.S. thought it would be such a great idea. Well, definitely the United States really liked him. The United States government really adores Alvaro Pardo. They definitely like him. He's probably really high up there on the list of their most likable individuals. Because they did a lot of things for him, and they wanted to have things work out for him. But, when it came to me and my son, they didn't care about us. They didn't care. And then I had people come up to me saying, you're just a pawn. How do you know you're not just a pawn? Well, the same individuals who were trying to discourage me from being with him, who were saying you're just a pawn, those weren't good people either. Those were people who were just invested in themselves. But it's true that the United States has used me as a pawn. No normal country does the kinds of things that they did to me and my son, and then continues to torture me through all this appeals stuff. They tortured me through all the appeals for my son, to try to get my son back as revenge, because I didn't marry Alvaro. If I had only stayed with Alvaro, none of these things would have ever happened, right? Because he does work for the United States, period. He is, and he was, a United States employee. There is no speculation about it. And again, I'm kind of tired today. I've had a lot of delays and stalling on getting my books for college and different things that are going on. And I'm just a little bit tired from that. So this is all I'm going to make for a post today. And I'll try to have more tomorrow. But yeah, so different things were going on. And then finally, we did get an airline flight because CPS never agreed. Oh, this is another thing. Michelle Erickson called me one time, or I called her to find out about visiting my son and setting up visitation because we were going to fly over. Because now Alvaro had airfare that he could use to fly us over. So I called Michelle Erickson, and I asked about that, and then she asked me when I was with Alvaro. She said, "Are you being medicated at all?" She asked a couple different questions, but she asked if I was being medicated. And I said, why? Or, I think I said no, but I said why. And I think that one of the reasons she asked if I was being medicated is because she wanted to know if I knew that I was being medicated. I was being medicated by my own fiancé without my consent. I think I have a couple of different ideas of what kinds of medication, but I was definitely being medicated. And that is possibly another reason why the United States wanted me to marry him and stay with him, because I was going to continue being part of their little research plan. So in that sense, that would have worked out really well with the military. So I guess if they thought they'd stop torturing me so they could use me for some other kind of medicinal research, that would work out for them. I'm very sure that I was being medicated with some kind of birth control. And there was definitely, I was being medicated with something for the yeast infection that I had that was never cleared up, because I've never had a systemic treatment for it. I've never had like an IV and a whole like full-blown, let's eradicate this systemic yeast treatment. They just gave me little doses of things here and there that made it go away. Even though my diet didn't change, my activities were the same. I mean, I have this. Ever since I nursed my son and Dr. Butler refused to take care of it, I've had it. And it is always showing up. It always shows up on my body, no matter what I eat or do. But the only time that it didn't is when I was being given drugs, medications, to get rid of those unsightly rashes, that basically, wouldn't be so attractive, I guess, in the bedroom, because that's what the United States government considered me to be. They considered me to be nothing more than someone they could move around in the bedroom. And I guess the only time they ever cared about my body or my health was to make sure that my skin looked okay. So, and that I didn't have a rash when I was with Alvaro, their state employee. And I believe Alvaro would drug me. And I also know that the Post Pub was giving me free food, quote unquote. And I believe that there was something in some of the food that they were giving me. And that was right before I met Alvaro. And I later found out that Canada and the U.S., they were both doing quote unquote research on candida treatments, basically for yeast. And they were doing experimental kinds of research in Toronto, Canada. After seeing how Canada and the United States colluded and worked together to falsely arrest me, kidnap my son from me, and do all kinds of horrible things to me, defame me, and everything, I have no doubt that Canada and the United States would work together and agree to jointly have me medicated. I mean, for all I know, Alvaro was also working for Canada. I'm sure the U.S. wouldn't even care. I mean, they basically do whatever, as long as they're both going to cover for each other's torture crimes, they're on the same page.